When I'm at my best, I'm operating from a mindset of like sort of like constructing the world around me rather than reacting to it. So if I knew I were, what if I already knew I were an Olympic gold medalist? What would that look like for me in this moment? How would I train? How would that ease whatever anxieties I have entering the ring? What sort of confidence would that give me? And blah, blah, blah. So if you can ride from that place, you're coming into the ring from a completely different standpoint, rather than sort of like your self-worth being hinged upon one performance.
Welcome to Practical Horseman's Podcast, a show featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show, which runs every other week, is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Jocelyn Pierce, and this week's episode is with 2018 World Equestrian Games team gold medalist Adrienne Sternlicht. Although 27-year-old Adrienne Sternlicht's main passion has always been riding, she has taken an unorthodox path to the top of the sport. Adrienne competed on ponies successfully, but unlike many riders who go on to compete in juniors and equitation, Adrienne's parents encouraged her to scale back on her riding during high school and instead focus on her studies and other extracurricular activities in an effort to become a more well-rounded individual. While working on her bachelor's degree in public policy at Brown University, Adrienne returned to show jumping. She graduated in 2016 and decided to focus full-time on the sport. It was also in 2016 that Adrienne began training full-time with four-time Olympian McLean Ward and purchased and began her partnership with her beloved mare, Cristalline, or Stella. Adrienne made her Nations Cup debut in May 2017 with Stella, where they helped the U.S. team win the silver medal in Mexico. She continued on to be a member of several Nations Cup teams and collected numerous individual top placings, resulting in her selection to the U.S. show jumping team for the 2018 World Equestrian Games, where she and Stella helped the U.S. team clinch a historic victory over Sweden, bringing home the gold medal for the U.S. for the first time in 32 years. Most recently, Adrienne won back-to-back World Cup qualifiers. First, Longines FEI Jumping World Cup Thermal, where she and Benny's Legacy, whom she had only jumped at 3 events prior, took the top spot on the podium. And then again a week later at the Longines FEI Jumping World Cup Las Vegas, again with Benny's Legacy. With these two wins, Adrienne is now sitting third in the standings for the Eastern League, which determines the riders who will qualify for the World Cup final in Las Vegas this April. I caught up with Adrienne at the Washington International Horse Show last October, where we chatted before she set off for a run in the nation's capital. During our conversation, Adrienne shared what she's learned from McLean, how she's developed her partnership with Stella, her pre-competition routines, and mental strategies for success in the saddle. But first, I want to thank this episode's sponsor, ADM Animal Nutrition. Confused with the vast offering of equine nutritional products? ADM Animal Nutrition's Forage First program makes feeding horses uncomplicated and easy. First, start with forage, a horse's natural feed, and then add the needed Forage First performance-proven Patriot feeds. Patriot feeds are formulated for today's performance horses using the latest scientific data. Patriot utilizes grow-strong minerals, multiple sources of high-quality protein, quality grains, highly digestible fiber sources, pre- and probiotics, and added vegetable fats to provide balanced nutrition for horses. With this combination, horses can be healthy and perform at their best with less risk of metabolic and digestive disorders. Where forage supplies are limited or of poor quality, choose one of the complete feeds in the Patriot lineup of products. For more information, visit www.admequine.com. ADM Animal Nutrition is also a sponsor of Practical Horseman's 2020 Longines FEI Jumping World Cup Final Sweepstakes. Enter to win a trip for two to the World Cup Final in Las Vegas this April. Event tickets, airfare, and hotel accommodations are all included. Plus, the winners will also receive a VIP all-access pass to spend an afternoon with Olympic gold medalist Melanie Smith-Taylor. Enter at practicalhorsemanmag.com and scroll down to find the World Cup sweepstakes by January 24th to win. Now let's jump right into the episode as Adrienne shares how her love of horses and riding began.
Well, I've always been an animal lover, and my best friend growing up, her family was very into horses. Actually, her younger sister is Sydney Schulman, who beat me last night in the costume class. She's one of my closest friends, and they're like family. My family has zero affiliation with horses, and they had this at least 18 hand horse named Samson in their backyard. And I went for a play date one day, and then I refused to get off. And my mom came to pick me up and begged for lessons, and ended up leasing a pony a few years later.
And then you successfully competed in ponies, and then kind of unlike most riders, instead of moving into juniors and equitation, you stopped riding for a little bit. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I never stopped riding, but I definitely scaled back. It was very important to my parents and to me in retrospect, though I do actually watch these equitation classes, even though I never did any of them. That I was well-rounded. So I went to boarding school, and that made it a bit difficult to ride as often as I wanted to. And plus, I was interested in other things. I was very involved in different literary magazines at my school, and I also played squash for the varsity team, and traveled at boarding school. I went to Choate. So sort of the combination of that and like a rigorous academic schedule made it difficult for me to ride more than 2 or 3 times a month. But I started riding more seriously again when I turned 18.
And what kind of brought you back into that taking the riding a little bit more serious?
I always wanted to, but my parents' excuse was, or not their excuse, but their explanation was that first I needed to get into college. So I got into Brown early decision, and when I did, I was very lucky that my dad said, okay, we promised you could try to do this. We'll give you a budget, and with that budget, you can buy 1 horse, you can buy 10 horses, do whatever you like. And with that, I was able to purchase 3 horses, my first horse being a veteran sort of Grand Prix horse. I was very privileged to ride. And actually, he's retiring here. Addison Gierkin has been riding him. So one of those horses I still have and compete. And that's sort of how it started.
You've certainly trained with kind of the best riders in the sport. Can you just kind of talk about some of those mentors or the coaches that have influenced you and what you've learned from them?
Yeah, I started at Heritage Farm as an 8 or 9-year-old. And I think that they give the ultimate foundation to riders. I wish I had more of that when I was of the age. I ride with McLean Ward now, and Lily Keenan rides with us. And it's amazing to see the thousands of hours of equitation drilling that went into sort of her foundation that I feel like are lacking in mine. Yeah, I'm definitely envious of that. And after that, when I transitioned to boarding school, I started working with Linda Langmeyer, who was like very fundamental to help producing me as a rider, making me an effective rider, and just sort of honing my love of the sport. It's a wonderful family dynamic there, and I'm still engaged with her to this day. I have a homebred hunter with her, cool. So that's fun. And then I started working with Laura Kraut a bit in conjunction with Linda. I think Laura is like an unbelievable team player. At the time, we had a crazy group of riders riding with us. And I don't know how she ran the operation that she did between myself, but I was at a much lower level. Jessie Springsteen, Paris Ellen, Elise Oken, Calvin Dobbs, Emma Heiss, and Emily Moffat. We were all there. It was great. It was like a school riding academy. And then I sort of didn't end up going to Europe a bit and was working with Linda again during the school year. And that ended up introducing me to McLean. He helped me, and I loved working with him, and I've been with him to this day.
And it seems like you guys definitely have a great relationship, and he's been such a huge mentor to you. What have you learned just from the past few years working with him?
Oh, I don't know where to start. It's a very refined operation, I would say. It's very much a well-oiled machine, the way that it runs. He is quite simple about the way he does it and everything. There are while he's a genius at managing the horses and picking horses and planning their schedules, we don't do anything super intricate or bizarre at home. I think there are no secrets to his program besides good riding and good horsemanship. And so in that aspect for me, he sort of simplified a lot of things that simplified or almost demystified the sport for me at the highest level. I'm always, even now, amazed at how there's 1,000 ways to get from Rome to Rio, right? So like his program is wildly different, I think, than some other top riders, and both work. And so one thing he's really taught me is about like finding what works for you, which is definitely a bit of trial and error, and is something that I believe as riders we're always refining and sort of honing that. But I would say he made me realize that it didn't need to be as complicated as I often wanted to make it seem.
And what do you think makes a good horseman? What kind of qualities, or what do you think good horsemanship is?
So it's sort of an interesting question for me that I wouldn't have found interesting until about a year ago. So I think after the World Championships, for me, I achieved very far beyond where I considered myself as a rider. And so after that, the question sort of arose for me of like, what does success look like in this sport? And is success, of course, that's, I believe, success in anyone's terms, but like, how do I find a way to do this on a day-to-day basis that is really gratifying and makes me feel successful? So I think I've come to realize that success is like liking what you do and the way that you do it. And for me, the horsemanship part is very much about the way that I do the sport. Because I didn't grow up with a horse background, and I sort of rose to a level in the sport. I was jumping big classes, and I honestly didn't know a lot of what I felt like I should know, and I think I was a bit embarrassed not to know. And so I've sort of taken the past year or so, really taking a step back to be like, okay, how can I do this more in a way that makes me feel in touch with the horses and with the horsemanship side of things? And for me, ultimately, that's success.
And talking about WEG and the lead up to WEG, what was it like kind of preparing for such a huge monumental event?
It sort of comes in stages. I'm super goal oriented, so I love when I have one thing I can focus on. And with for me now, it's sort of the Olympics and my horses coming back into form, Cristalline. And I think I joke with my groom that great, I get to act crazy about one thing now. And so I really, starting out the year in 2018, leading up to WEG, I really did not see myself as having a chance at all. And then I was having a good circuit and realized that the long list was a possibility. And so it sort of was reaching different milestones and pushing myself mentally to see what I could do and if I could deliver in those most important and profound moments. And that was such an amazing learning experience for me.
And then actually being at the competition, I mean, were you 24 or 25?
25.
You're 25 years old and you just win a gold medal. What was going through your mind?
I learned so much being there. The first day I tried to ride as if I were at a championship, which sounds kind of silly, but you can't ride the event that you're at. What we do is the same no matter where we are. And it has to be treated as such because that's what got us there, right? And I sort of had that epiphany the second day after trying to ride, create this whole narrative around my experience the first day and riding with way too much aggression. So anyways, I would say that the whole experience is a bit of a blur. But what I most remember was a really like quiet moment, actually, walking into the ring on Sunday for the top 12, the final round. And it was sort of like, felt like it was like going for a Sunday morning stroll, and a track that was bigger than the Olympics. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to encapsulate it into even like a short conversation. But I learned so much as a human, I would say, being there.
Mm-hmm. And you definitely, Cristalline's obviously very special to you, and you have a very special bond. Can you just talk a little bit about that and kind of how you developed that?
Yeah. So she was a pipe dream for me. That's always how I describe her. Even now, I think I'd say she's my greatest motivation. 100% is to be as good as I can for her. And what that looks like for me is showing up in every way I can. But yeah, when I got her at first, I was so in awe of the horse that I was like afraid a little bit to even like get into her on the flat, or she was only 8, so she had a lot of work to be done in development, on the development side. But I was just amazed by her and being around her. She has this very like quiet and calm demeanor. It's funny now because I've been on the road so much this fall, and every time I come home, the first thing I do is go to her stall, and she's really annoyed at me and also my groom Emma that we leave her. I was seriously like, she's very cold, and it takes her about a day to warm back up to us. I think she's annoyed that we keep leaving, but she'll be with us soon. So yeah, I would say like she's definitely like my best friend. I don't feel like I'm riding a horse when I'm with her. So yeah, I treasure the time that I spend with her, whether it's wandering around on foot or, in the saddle. She's something different.
And can you talk a little bit about your overall training philosophy?
Yeah, for sure. So what I love about McLean's philosophy is he gives me a little bit of leeway, I would say, just a little bit, into finding my own path. So still, I keep things quite simple. We actually don't work the horses as much as I think other people do. I think that they have to enjoy some of the time that they spend with you. I think it can't always be work when you're together. But again, I think that's my philosophy. I remember reading an article with Luciana Diniz, who said something about like, I can't win with a horse I don't love. And that's something I can very much relate to. And I think for me, the way that I'm ultimately able to be successful is about like, that relationship and that understanding with the horse. So I think in that capacity, everyone is different. And again, that comes back to finding what works for you. And yeah.
So it's you have to have that emotional connection as well.
Yeah. I think a horse that I can understand their mind, and then you can ride sympathetically. And, regardless of the type of horse. I have a newer horse who's been like, I say she's my greatest teacher in my life right now. I like to help. I like to do something while I'm riding. And I think the hardest thing for me to do is like just sit still, do nothing, be super present and super calm, and not like unreactive almost. And so she's teaching me sort of like a level of awareness, and I talk about like a mind-body connection that I never knew I had to have. So I can't wait to start competing with Cristalline again, because I'm hoping I'm going to be so much better than I was even a year ago. So
that's great. And do you have a routine before a competition? Do you get nervous?
Yes, I really have a routine. I don't get nervous in the sense of the height of the fences, but I think I get anxious in an anticipatory sense. So what I do is I always do at least a 5-minute meditation. I like to do a body scan, and get myself a little bit out of my head, because I think that is what for me gives me the greatest awareness that I'm living in either past or future, and not where I am. I also have this weird mushroom drink thing that I like. It's Four Sigmatic. They're pretty popular now. They're like for focus, and people always ask me what it is, and I'm like, it's not special. I'm not saying that there's no secret sauce, right, for anything. It's just about creating a routine and something that works for you and gives you comfort in uncomfortable situations. And then the other thing I do is before big classes, I'm a big fitness enthusiast, I guess you could say. Normally before a big class, I like to run. We joke that I lunge myself just as we lunge the horses. I think it's a way of just sort of clearing my head and also keeping myself busy.
You mentioned the fitness aspect. How else do you stay in shape? Is it mostly running that you like to do, or do you do other things?
Yeah, I like to run. I like yoga. I think yoga for me is quite like a spiritual thing. And there's times when I feel like I really need it. So I don't think of yoga so much as though it can be great exercise. Like I'll do a flow class because I feel like I need it mentally more so than for the fitness aspect. So often if I do yoga, I'll combine it with some sort of cardio class. As well, I love solid core. They have it in DC. It's super fun.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. And classes like Barry's Boot Camp, I love. And then I do train with someone in New York when I am home. My balance is actually really bad, which is, I am always like, I used to ski competitively and I don't really know how the two work together. So that's something I'm always working on. And I'm quite small, so it's important that I'm strong. So yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy working out, and like I said, right now I'm training for a half marathon, and I committed to doing that this fall because I knew that I have I have Olympic dreams, and I was like, how can I create sort of more near-term goals for myself in order to treat myself like a serious athlete. I think often in this sport, again, it's whatever works for you. But for me, I know that like peak performance means peak shape. And so that's a constant process of trying to achieve that state.
And also peaking at the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
So for you, for the yoga, how does that help your riding? Is it just kind of getting your mind in like a Zen-like state?
Yeah, I would say that I think yoga can be quite emotional, and especially as someone who likes to do a lot of cardio and be very active and constantly be pushing myself, and my reaction to a bad round is I need to go for a run, and I need to sprint, and I need to do this, and I'm not good enough, I'm not this, and all these narratives that we can have. And so yoga is the opposite and sort of forces you to slow down and actually be with where you are. And sometimes for half of class, I'm very distracted, But yeah, I think yoga for me is about being in touch with my body. And I realize that I ride my best when I'm in my body and not my mind.
Do you have any other kind of mental strategies or tips on how you stay mentally focused?
Breathing. That was sort of like an epiphany that I've had that recently, and it keeps coming in different variations. I find that I'm constantly reminding myself to get back to things that I know work for me, right? Because I think in our sport, while we do have class times, things can sometimes feel very unstructured, and also the travel makes everything feel very kind of unstructured. And so I really think like the closer I can stick to my routine, and again, for every person that's different. So that might mean like chatting with your friends for somebody. I am more of a lone wolf type of person. So I really like to like be by myself before I compete and take time for myself. But I think that that's sort of the greatest thing that you can do. I think I just went off on two different segments, but sorry. But like first off, realizing that I could control my breath was such a profound sort of shift for me, because we breathe all day long, but we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? And so that's, again, just tapping into the moment. And so now, like, especially when I'm nervous before a big class, and especially with that one horse I was speaking about who's super hot, her name is Justy, I literally will walk the course and be like, one, breathe. Every horse is different, so some of my other horses don't require that same that same level of stillness. But yeah, I don't know. The amazing thing about sport for me is that it brings up like so many of our like primal instincts and like our fight or flight responses. And when I'm at my best, I'm operating from a mindset of like sort of like constructing the world around me rather than reacting to it. So if I knew what if I already knew I were an Olympic gold medalist? What would that look like for me in this moment? How would I train? How would I ease whatever anxieties I have entering the ring? What sort of confidence would that give me? And blah, blah, blah. So if you can ride from that place, you're coming into the ring from a completely different standpoint, rather than sort of like your self-worth being hinged upon one performance. And so even talking about it's a good reminder for me. Yeah, so it's such a practice. And the past few years have really opened my eyes to it.
And what do you think makes a strong competitor?
I would say that sort of two of the pillars I think of a strong competitor is someone who's resilient. I think you win so much less than you lose in this sport. And being able to rebound quickly and not hang on to your last round is very important. The other thing I think is having a really strong belief in your program. I would think that's one of McLean's greatest strengths, is that regardless of what happens that day in the ring, he goes back and he does the same thing that he did the day before. And that we're never really trying to rework the wheel. Everyone always jokes that McLean rides in the same bits, wears the same jackets, same everything is, we've been jumping the same course at home basically for 3 years, which is like a single and outside, one combination, and there's probably 6 or 7 jumps in the ring. Anyways, but it just goes back to the fact that I think he truly believes in his program and his foundation, and I think that that is like his ultimate source of strength, as well as sort of his belief in his team. And I think when you have people around you who have confidence in you, it makes all the difference.
What do you think is the hardest part of the sport for you?
For me, it's definitely the mental side of it. I think on a big day, I can really deliver, which for some people is what's more difficult for them. But I think for me, the day-to-day of just taking it as what it is. For instance, not getting hung up on a week of four fault rounds, which in the end is fine. It's not like you had a terrible week, but sometimes I let that gnaw at me, and then I let that sort of compound. And so that's sort of what I've been working on, right, is liking the way that I can do it every day. And I would say that feeling of success, it waxes and wanes, but generally, I think, my strength is that I fully believe that I can deliver on in those most important moments.
And we talked a little bit earlier about success, but why do you think you've been so successful, especially at such a young age?
I think it'd be naive to not attribute it hugely to my horse. I don't really look at myself as super successful. I mean, I guess every person is different. But I think something that where McLean and I are very similar is he's always reminding me that he doesn't wake up and see what, Lily and I see every morning when we look at him, and his illustrious career and how many victories he's had. I think good horses makes a huge difference. And I think when you do have that one really special horse, often everything else just sort of seems to fall into place, because you have that confidence, and then that confidence can translate to your other rides. But I think I would say that the greatest key to my success has been my determination. I am very stubborn, and in that capacity, I'm able to sort of disregard any negativity that comes my way. And I've been able to find more and more of what works for me, and kind of be unapologetic about doing that. I've been working with, he's not really a sports psychologist technically. His name is Peter Crone. He's blowing up. I'm very excited for him. He's amazing. He has several podcasts, and I think a TV show coming out soon. And he's been sort of instrumental to my success and helping me. It's almost like the more you know mindset-wise, and the more that your world is, you're open to, you can't unlearn and unknow that sort of awareness. So after awareness is implementation, right? And I think it's like the process of implementation is what brings success.
And if you weren't a professional rider, what would you do instead? Do you have any plans to use your degree from Brown at some point?
Yes, my parents would love this question. Yeah, I do. I think going back to school, or finding more of a balance with social justice work is really my passion. And so right now I sort of dabble in it. When I am home, I go to a ton of lectures and dinners, and I was working for the nonprofit Robin Hood, which is sort of New York City's largest poverty fighting organization. And so, and I have a few friends in the criminal justice reform space, and so I'm able to help them on sort of, an ad hoc basis. So I think any sort of shift to me will look like being able to spend a little bit more time doing that and having a bit more balance in that side of my life. But that all comes after 2020.
Do you have an issue that's particularly important to you?
I mean, I'm fairly interested in sort of the prison industrial complex. I have a friend who started a nonprofit that focuses specifically on changing policy within the prison industrial complex and sort of the exploitation of the sort of least advantaged in society. And also on bail reform. And again, the way that the current bail system really just sucks resources out of the neediest communities. And so I don't know exactly what my engagement will look like in the future, but I know that, and it's sort of, I feel a moral imperative to give back. And I don't even really see it as giving back. I see it as being able to use my privilege for some sort of, better future. So
that's great. And what, you kind of mentioned you're big into working out and exercise, and you talked about, being on the varsity squash team. What other interests or hobbies do you have outside of riding?
It's a funny question. I'm like, what else do I do? I love to hike. I love to read. I love to write. I'm very, very interested in like holistic nutrition. So I've been taking a nutrition class online for the past 6 months. I'm very interested in sort of like optimal human performance, I guess, as like a very broad category. And I think the way that like we have this sort of reserve as humans that we don't often tap into. So yeah, I would say I enjoy cooking, and I love to travel. I mean, I think that's one of the many privileges that we have as riders in this sport, is we get to see the world in a different way, not necessarily from a touristic point of view, but seeing sort of little towns in different areas of the country and the world.
Well, thanks so much
Yeah,
for chatting with me, Adrienne. This is great.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode, and thanks again to the sponsor of this episode, ADM Animal Nutrition. And join us again in 2 weeks. Upcoming conversations are with top equitation and hunter trainer Frank Madden, international show jumper Andrew Wells, and rising star Brian Mogray. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, please rate and review the show. I'm Jocelyn Pierce, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman podcast.